Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, Sword and Shield has easily become one of my favorite weapons in Monster Hunter Wilds. It's my second most played one in the entire game so far, and if you want to slap monsters to death with the most potential variety of any weapon in the game, with some of the safest guarding due to constant perfect guard activation, super high uptime on damage due to incredible repositioning tools, or just using items without ever really needing to sheathe, aerial attacks for mount damage and just generally hitting harder to hit parts of monsters, stun damage attacks to knock the monster over. There are just so many parts of what makes Sword and Shield strong, and in Title Update 1, our strongest builds have gotten even stronger, and we have even more comfort available in the strongest builds now, depending on some specific choices. So today, I'm going to present Sword and Shield meta builds in two flavors. The first is pure damage focus, just pumping up that effective raw number as much as we can, ignoring what the monster's doing really. The second is like percentage points weaker sometimes, but percentage points stronger other times, and it has super recovery, the Shia set bonus to outdo chip damage, and full counterstrike. We can't trigger counterstrike with like an offset, which weapons with offsets can, because Sword and Shield doesn't have an offset, but for an average player, you're going to get hit once every minute or so, and that will give counterstrike high enough uptime for a nice bit of bonus from the raw attack that it gives. But that's part of why I'm offering two sets: pure damage boost without thinking about counterstrike at all, or counterstrike with some super recovery to balance it out a bit too. Either way, this is just pushing efficiency on Sword and Shield even harder than it had been before Title Update 1 thanks to the new additions. The main set is essentially just updating the previous best build with a piece of the new armor options because it's just more efficient to work around, but the second build is at least a touch more fresh. First up then, let's talk weapons, because there is actually a discussion to be had here right now. Generally speaking, especially when playing builds like this that are super heavily focused around damage over utility, Shia weapons are simply worse than Artian weapons, at least ones that are rolled at least decently. The whiteflame torrent skill provides flat damage bonuses with a bunch of conditional bits to it, but to put it as simply as possible, it is benefited by weapons that attack quickly and consistently, which Sword and Shield does. It gains damage if you hit bad hit zones, which you should generally avoid, but it does happen sometimes, and it gains damage over the length of a hunt if it gets longer. But the loss of decoration slots compared to Artian Sword and Shield hits us extremely hard because of how important and powerful both offensive guard and critical boost are as weapon skills, especially when you consider sharpness management as a factor as well. In the end, Shia weapons compared to a perfectly rolled Artian Sword and Shield is probably about a 3% or so difference in overall damage in a training dummy situation, at least just endlessly stabbing it, but the more realistic your hunt is, the better Shia skills get. If you have little breaks between your hit, the whiteflame torrent skill will start to do an even larger percentage of your overall damage. If your hunts run particularly long, it can actually overtake Artian effectiveness eventually, but again, the point of these two builds today is damage, so we aren't at the point where Shia is stronger than Artian unless you are playing extremely cautiously and slowly. They are more than usable if you just are sick of using an Artian weapon for Sword and Shield meta sets, but a perfectly rolled Artian weapon will outperform it, so I will be using an Artian weapon for this, but no, it's just perfectly fine not to do so. That said, as far as the rolls on Artian Sword and Shield, Paralysis and Blast are super high value depending on your goals. I prefer Blast status for solo and Paralysis status for multiplayer, mostly personally, or if you want to make and manage multiple different Sword and Shields, you can go with one of each element and start matching the monster's weaknesses, but that is a lot more investment into the Artian system. Personally, I think you're fine with Blast, Paralysis, and then maybe Dragon specifically as a good catch-all element for the toughest monsters around, because generally speaking, right now, as of this point in Title Update 1, there are now 8 of the top difficulty monsters in the game that are not at least resistant to Dragon, with multiple of them having Dragon element as their main weakness. You want to make your Sword and Shield with 3 attack parts, of course, as it's easier to get affinity than it is to get pure raw, and because you can overcap on affinity by going over 100%, whereas with attack we can just choose to scale our damage up without concern. So 3 attack parts. For the reinforcements, you ideally want 4 attack boosts and 1 sharpness boost, which I don't have on any Sword and Shield, but this will end up in some occasional sharpening mid-zone, even with the sharpness skill in the slots. You can instead run 2 sharpness boosts and 3 attack rolls as your reinforcements, which is a bit more comfort, but you do lose some attack. I'll be using 4 attack rolls in all of my math later on, as it's more than usable that way, but I want to be clear that it's such a minor damage loss to go for 2 sharpness rolls instead of 1, so if you want that comfort, you should probably go for it. Moving on then, let's talk about your armor, and we'll do this one set at a time, basically starting with the pure normal player meta, by which I mean this isn't going to be for like speed running. Things like ambush is not going to be considered. We're going to be considering agitator as being a lower uptime than a speedrunner would, because we'll have slower assumed kill times. Or things like working around the Jin dahaad 4-set bonus because the average player won't see their hunt times improved by making radical shifts to their builds to using those types of high investment skills instead of just good, reliable damage increases, which is what we'll be focusing on here today. That said, the main set is Gore Magala beta helmet, Shia beta chest, Gore beta gloves, waist, and legs. This gets us the Gore Magala 4-set bonus, which gives us frenzy when we're near a large monster. Then after you cleanse the frenzy, you get bonus affinity by default. You get more bonus affinity from the antivirus skill that we've also got within our set 2, and then the 4-set bonus gives you bonus raw attack, both while inflicted with the frenzy, and then even more attack after you cleansed it, being 10 attack when you are inflicted and 15 when you're cleansed. And then we've got just some good offensive skills and a bunch of sockets from the armor as well. We also use the exploiter charm for 2 ranks of weakness exploit, and for sword and shield, the corrupted mantle is still really good compared to every other mantle option, as our heavy guard paced playstyle doesn't really mesh well with rocksteady or evasion mantle's main purposes, so the extra damage output from corrupted is still really solid even after the nerfs. After that, let's talk decoration, starting with the weapon. We've got offensive guard 3 for a 15% increase to our raw attack after a well-timed guard, and sword and shield is quite possibly the best at keeping this buff active due to our fast guard frames and the guard slash ability to just reset the perfect guard window. So you can just sort of guard when you think an attack is about to hit, and if you're too early, you can hit guard slash and reset the guard window instead. It's really effective, and this is one of the only weapon types where I would say the expectation for offensive guard is 100% uptime in combat. Offensive guard gets a combo decoration skill as well. My personal choice to use with it is handicraft as the bonus rank, just for a little bit of extra comfort, but you can get a single rank of guard as a skill instead. That said, for the other 2 slots, I've got Critical Boost 3 for an increase to the damage of our critical hits as we have a high affinity rate, and then Master's Touch, which is an 80% chance of not losing sharpness when you have a critical hit. We have tons of affinity, which makes us extremely potent. If you want to use Shia weapons instead of Artian weapons, you would either drop the crit boost and use Razor Sharp for your sharpness management comfort, or drop the sharpness management entirely and use crit boost in the remaining slots, but you'll have to sharpen probably once per zone. No matter what though, you are not giving up offensive guard. It is too good for sword and shield. As for the armor decorations then, we've got 3 tenderizer jewels inside of here to max out our weakness exploit skill up at 5 ranks, which is 30% affinity against weak monster parts and an extra 20% against wounds. Then 3 mighty jewels for 3 maximum might across the set, which is an extra 30% bonus affinity when you are at full stamina. This has a bit of leeway on the actual effect where you can refill your stamina after spending some without losing maximum might, and the skill was slightly adjusted in Title Update 1 to the point that if you use small enough amounts of stamina, it will actually never lose maximum might as long as it refills to maximum before the buff drops off. Whereas before the update, those little chunks would eventually add up and you would lose it at some point. This means maximum might works even with backstep consistently now for sword and shield, which it didn't really before, making it even better as a skill for us. Then we've got 1 chain jewel for the 1 rank of burst, as the first rank of the skill is by far the most effective for raw weapons, and sword and shield can super consistently keep the 5 hit bonus of the skill active instead of just the first hit bonus, so this is really efficient, honestly. Then 2 sane jewels for the remaining 2 ranks of antivirus to go with the Gore Magala set bonus, and then we've got 1 remaining 1 slot left in this set. I generally like using the growth jewel for the self-improvement skill because it's the only real 1 slot for pure offense. It's just a really small amount that it gives you, and you'll rarely notice it as it doesn't trigger until after multiple minutes of the hunt passing. For multiplayer, I would instead recommend using Shockproof to remove ally flinching. The full skill list then is 3 critical boost, 3 offensive guard, 1 handicraft as the bonus rank to my offensive guard decoration, Master's Touch, 5 weakness exploit, 3 constitution for reduced stamina use on rolls, mainly more than anything, 3 maximum might, 3 antivirus, 2 agitator for increased attack and affinity against enraged monsters, 2 evade window as a bonus, 1 burst, 1 coalescence as a bonus for your element or status attacks, 1 flinch free, self-improvement, and then Gore Magala 4-set bonus. And now it's time for math! 225 attack and 5% affinity is the assumed base stats on a perfect rolled Artian weapon. First, we gain 15% of our weapon attack from offensive guard, which does not count other attack increases before it applies, so you use it on the base number. We then add 8 attack for level 1 burst at full uptime, as it is very reliable for us to do so. Then we will be adding 5.6 attack for agitator level 2. As of Title Update 1, we are readjusting how we calculate agitator in sets on this channel. Prior to this, we've been counting it as 50% uptime, which was accurate in Rise and Sunbreak, but is definitely conservative now for the way that hunts go in Wilds at the moment for a meta damage set, as with hunt times being as low as they are in wilds, as out of specifically something like Shia, which is uncharacteristically long, you're more than likely to hit around 70% agitator uptime in most of your hunts now, making it a generally better skill than we've counted it as before. So we are now counting agitator at 70% value average across a hunt. Then we've got the Gore Magala 4-set attack bonus, 10 attack while frenzied, 15 attack while not. We are counting this at 80% uptime on cleansed, 20% for the cleansing part itself. This puts this at a 14 raw attack average bonus throughout the hunt for 286.35. Then we have our critical hit considerations, 5% base affinity on the weapon, weakness exploit is 30% consistent affinity, which we will count as constant as you should always be hitting weak monster parts, and 20% bonus affinity when hitting wounds. We won't count that part for the effective raw calculations, but be aware that it exists. We've also got 30% affinity coming from maximum might, and then for antivirus we are now counting Gore set bonus frenzy as being cleansed 80% of the time in combat, so 25% affinity with 80% uptime is the equivalent of 20% affinity consistently, which puts us at an average of 85% affinity. Agitator level 2 is 5% affinity while the monster is enraged, and we are counting agitator at 70% uptime now, so that's 3.5% affinity on top, which then gives us our average affinity through a hunt of 88.5%. We gain up to 10% affinity when Corrupted Mantle is active and boosted. We gain a bit of affinity when hitting wounds as well, so this lets us be at reliably high affinity numbers without overcapping too often with our other methods either. We have 3 critical boost in the setup 2, which boosts the critical damage modifier from 25% bonus damage to 34% bonus damage. 88.5% chance at a 34% damage boost means that we, on average, are getting a 30.09% boost to our damage throughout a hunt. 286.35 attack times 1.3009 for a crit is 372.5, with a bunch of inconsequential decimals being rounded out with that too. We then increase this by 32%, which is the white sharpness damage modifier, for a total effective raw of 491.72, with some rounding done there as well. This is exceptionally high effective raw, quite a silly number to hit, and it doesn't count any status or element shenanigans that you can choose to add on top of your Artian weapon choice too. Then for our second set today, weapon stuff stays the same really, armor pieces will change, and for this we're using the Shia beta helmet and legs, the arkveld beta chest, the Gore Magala beta gloves, and the Gore Magala alpha waist, with the exploiter charm as well again, and the corrupted mantle. This gets us the Gore 2-set bonus instead of the 4. We lose some of the raw attack, but we keep all of the affinity that you get from the 2-set, which is honestly the most important part, and we gain some other offensive skills in here, and we also get the Shia 2-set bonus for health recovery past the red part of your health bar after taking a hit. We then have our decorations for the armor for this one too, which are Challenger for a 2nd rank of Agitator, 3 Mighty for full maximum might, 2 Tenderizer to finish off weakness exploit up to level 5, 2 Counter Jewels to get us counterstrike up to level 3, 2 Sane Jewels to finish off antivirus as a skill up to level 3, this is very important as well, and then 1 Chain Jewel just to give you that 1 hyper efficient first rank of the burst skill, and this gets a final skill list of 3 critical boost, 3 offensive guard, 1 handicraft as the bonus rank on the decoration, master's touch, 5 weakness exploit, 3 constitution, 3 counterstrike, which gives you 25 bonus attack for 45 seconds after you are properly hit by an attack, which you can also self-trigger with barrel bombs if you really want to as well. We've got 3 maximum might, 3 antivirus, 2 agitator, 2 recovery speed, 1 burst, 1 evade window, and 1 elemental absorption, which isn't too bad to use this with elemental weapons as well. Essentially, this set trades out the raw attack from Gore 4-set bonus for the raw attack of counterstrike, and then you get the super recovery set bonus as well, a bonus. For the math comparison, using the same weapon-based stats, 225 attack increased by 15% for offensive guard, plus 8 for burst, plus 5.6 for agitator level 2 at 70% uptime. Then we'll diverge a little bit here. We'll do 1 calculation with counterstrike active, which has 25 bonus raw attack, and 1 without counterstrike active, just so you can feel the sort of ebbs and flows. Affinity and crit valuations are just exactly the same as they are in the first set, 88.5% average crit chance with a 34% critical damage modifier, so we now hit 354.3 without counterstrike, 386.82 with counterstrike. Add in the white sharpness modifier of a 32% damage bonus for final numbers of 467.7 without counterstrike and 510.6 with counterstrike, which is absolutely incredible. This means means when counterstrike is not active, you have about 4.9% less damage than the first set that we talked about in exchange for having the super recovery set bonus, which you might consider worth it. When counterstrike is active, however, you have 3.8% more damage than the previous set. So if you get hit by the monster enough to keep counterstrike active for about 60% of the hunt duration, this will even out at the same offensive effectiveness as the other set, but with more comfort baked into it, a little bit more survivability. If you have higher uptime on counterstrike than that, which most players will, honestly, it's just better than the first set. Basically, this is just a real moment to look in the mirror and ask yourself if you get hit by the monster once every minute and 15 seconds or so on average. If the answer is yes, the second set is just purely better, which is why I wanted to present both versions, and because the first set will probably be better against like weak little monsters that you just won't get hit by as often. That just about does it for today then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of the two best Sword and Shield sets now in Monster Hunter Wilds in Title Update 1, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I hope you enjoy using these sets for yourself as well if you choose to. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.